Her best friend told me at our anniversary party that she only picked me because he was unavailable.
Suggests you're not
and
grounded
in
reality
reality
about
this
relationship
until I noticed
my
my wife didn't say
looking
a word
at the
to deny
evidence
it.
spread across
I'm
her desk.
33. Been
She
married
granted
to
a
Anna for
3-year
7
restraining
years,
order,
and her best
no
friend
contact
Max
of
has
any
always
kind,
been around like
no
some
coming
permanent
within
fixture.
500 feet
I
of
never
us,
questioned
our home.
He was
or
at our
Anna's
wedding,
workplace,
at every
no
holiday
third
dinner,
party
knew our
communication.
Netflix password,
Max stared at
had
us
a drawer
as
at
we
our
left
place
the
for his
courthouse
stuff,
when he
and I could
crashed
see he
after
still
late
didn't
nights.
accept it.
Everyone
Still
called him
thought this was
family,
temporary,
so I did too.
that Anna would
Our
come back to
7th
him
anniversary
once she saw
party
reason.
had 40
We
people
went home
crammed
and
into our
Anna
apartment,
finally broke
and
down,
I was playing
cried
host
in a
while
way she
Anna
hadn't
worked the
since
room
the
in this
started,
red dress
said
that
she
made
felt
her look
stupid
incredible.
for not seeing it sooner.
Max showed up
for
with
letting him
expensive
back in
champagne,
after college,
already
for
loud,
thinking his obsession
already
had
touchy
just
with
been
her,
a phase.
and that way
I
trained
told her that
myself
manipulation
not to
works
notice,
because it's
he'd
gradual,
stand too close,
that Max
whisper
had things
spent
that made
years
her laugh,
normalizing his
and
presence,
I'd feel like the
making her
third
doubt
wheel
her
at
own
my own
instincts.
celebration, positioning
Around
himself
10
as
that night,
indispensable.
I went to grab
We
more
started
ice from the
therapy
kitchen,
the following
and
week.
Max followed me
Both
in,
individual
leaned against
sessions
the counter
for
with
Anna
a smile
and couples
that didn't reach
counseling
his
for
eyes.
us.
Her
He started
therapist
telling me how I was
specialized
just
in
the
helping
backup
people
plan,
who'd been
how
manipulated
Anna had
by
wanted him,
long-term
but he was
psychological
tied up
abuse.
with someone else back
Worked
then.
with Anna on
I asked what he
understanding
why
meant,
she'd
and
minimized
he laid out
Max's
this whole
behavior,
story about how
why
Anna
she'd
used
been
to be in
afraid
love
to
with him,
enforce boundaries,
how I was the easy
why his
option
attention
who didn't
had
require
felt validating
any effort,
even when part
how
of
the
her knew it
timing
was
just
wrong.
wasn't right for them.
I had conditions
She
for
picked
staying
you
in the
because
marriage,
she needed
and
to
I made
prove
them
someone
clear
would
from
pick
the
her,
start.
he said.
Anna
And the way
needed
he
to
said
stay
it
in
so
therapy,
confident, like
work
they
on
discussed
understanding
this
her
version of
part in
events,
this before made something
figure out
cold
why
settle
she
in my
valued
stomach.
Max's validation
The next 2 weeks, I
more than our
started seeing
relationship's
everything
health.
differently.
We needed
Anna
complete
texted Max
transparency.
constantly.
Her phone
Had this
and
old social
shoebox
media
of
university
open to me
photos
until
where he
trust
appeared
rebuilt.
in way too many.
No private
Let
conversations
him walk
with
into our
mutual
place
friends
without
who might
knocking
pass
like
information
he
to Max.
During movie
If
nights,
you break the
he'd
restraining
sit
order,
closer
if
to
you
her than I
contact
did.
him in any way,
Take up
I'm
space
done.
on our couch
I
like
told
he belonged there
and
more
she
than
agreed
me.
without
When I
hesitation.
carefully suggested
The
maybe we
first
could
few
see him
months
a
were
bit
hard.
less.
Anna
Anna
had
told me I
moments
was
where
being
she defended
controlling,
her past
said he was
choices,
like her
where
brother,
she tried to
accused
minimize
me
what
of
had
being
happened.
insecure.
But her
She said
therapist
it like I
kept
was the
bringing her
problem,
back
like
to reality.
noticing was worse than
Slowly,
what I was noticing.
she started seeing
So,
the patterns.
I backed off
how
and
Max
tried
had
something
exploited her
different.
guilt and
I
empathy.
pulled back a little,
How he'd made
gave
her
her
less
responsible
attention
for his
less
emotional
warmth,
state, just to
how
see
he
if she'd
positioned
noticed
himself
the
as the
distance.
one person
She
who
didn't,
truly
not for
understood her
days,
while
and that told
systematically
me everything
isolating
I
her
needed
from
to know about where
recognizing
her
how
focus
unhealthy their
actually
dynamic
was.
had become.
Max started
We're
showing
8
up
months
even
past
more
the
after that.
restraining order now,
Sunday
and
dinners,
life feels
random
different,
visits on
quieter,
weeknights, like
joining
we're
us for
finally
movies
building
on
something
Wednesday
that's
like
just
he'd been
ours.
invited.
Max
He'd grab
violated
our
the order
throw
once,
blanket, showed up at
settled
Anna's
between us on the
workplace
couch,
trying to deliver a
make
letter,
himself
and
comfortable
spent
in
a
ways
night in
that should
jail
have bothered
before
her,
his lawyer
but
got
somehow
him out.
never did.
The judge
I
extended
stopped
the
saying
restraining
anything,
order another
just kept
2
a mental
years,
list
and
of
warned
every
him the
boundary
next violation
crossed
would
that
mean
she didn't
serious
enforce.
jail time.
Then one Thursday,
Anna quit her
I came
adjuster
home early
position
from work
after that
because
incident.
I forgot files
Didn't
I
want to
needed
risk
for a
him
morning
knowing
meeting.
her schedule
2
or
cars in the
location.
driveway,
Found a
living
remote
room lights
position
on,
with a
and when I
different
walked in
insurance
quiet,
company. I
we
found them
moved
on the
to a
floor
different
surrounded
neighborhood
by
where Max
old
wouldn't
photo
know our
albums.
routines.
Max
Didn't
was
tell
talking
mutual
about
friends
some
our
night
new
they
address.
remembered,
Basically
asking if she
started
recalled
fresh.
when they thought
We
they'd
still have
actually
cameras,
end up together.
still check our
Anna
surroundings,
laughed, really
still
laughed,
save every
the
blocked
kind
call
of genuine
or email
sound
that
that
manages
manages
to
to
get
get her in
through.
months when
But
she was
the
with
panic
me.
has faded
I
into
made a
caution.
mistake back then.
Anna's
We
therapist
both know
says
she's
did.
made real
Max
progress,
said
leaning
that she's
closer
learning
to
to
her.
recognize
She didn't say
manipulation
no,
patterns,
didn't shut it down,
to trust her
just sat there
instincts
looking at
instead
him
of
like he'd
explaining
said
them
something
away,
profound,
to
instead of
understand that
something that should
kindness
have ended
without
their
boundaries
friendship on the
isn't
spot.
kindness at all. I stepped into
Our
the doorway
marriage
and
isn't
said
what it
I
was
forgot
7
my
years
files,
ago. Nothing
but
more,
maybe that's
and
good.
they jumped apart
Maybe
like
what we had
teenagers
before was
caught
built
built
on
on
ignoring
something they knew was
problems
wrong.
instead of solving
Max
them.
made some excuse
Now we
about
have
showing
actual
Anna
boundaries,
old
real
university
conversations
memories.
about what
Anna's
we need,
face went
and
red,
space
and
that
I just
belongs
walked
only
past them
to
to
us
my
without
office
someone
without
else's
another
shadow
word.
filling it.
20
The
minutes
apartment
later,
feels bigger
she knocked
somehow
on the
now that
door
it's just
and
the two
started
of with that line people
now that
always
every
use
photo
when
on
they're
our
about
wall
to
is
gaslight
actually
you,
ours.
telling me it wasn't
Now
what
that
I
the
thought.
person sitting next
I
to
just
Anna
said
on the
okay.
couch is
Didn't
the
argue.
person who's supposed
Didn't
to be
demand
there.
explanations.
The real
because
lesson
I
here
already
is
knew
that
what I'd
some
heard
people will
and what
exploit
I'd
your
seen.
kindness as
That
permission
night
to
after
stay in
Max
your life
left,
long after
Anna
they
tried
should
to
have been
act
gone.
normal.
And the
Asked
hardest
about
part
dinner like
isn't
nothing
recognizing the
happened.
red flags.
But I couldn't
It's
stop
accepting
replaying
that
his
years
words
of
or her
history
silence
don't
or the
justify
way they'd been
tolerating
sitting
behavior
so
that
close
makes
on
you
our floor
unsafe.
with our memories spread around
Documentation
them
saved
like
this
he had equal
situation.
claim to our history.
Trusting my instincts
I
despite
started going
being
through our
called
shared
controlling
photos that
saved
weekend,
this situation,
really
and
looking at them for
understanding
the
that
first
but
time.
we've been friends
Max
forever
was in should never
70%
trump
of our couple
this
shots
person
from the
is
last
obsessed
5
with
years.
my spouse,
Always positioned
saved this
between
marriage,
us.
or with his
Would
arm
you have
around
caught the
her,
signs earlier,
grinning at
or
the
would you
camera
have also
like he was
dismissed them
part
as
of the
overthinking?
package?
If
Our
your
vacation
partner hid a
photos,
dangerous past
our
like
Christmas
Anna did,
cards, could you
our
rebuild
birthday
trust,
celebrations,
or would that be the deal breaker?
He'd inserted himself into every major moment.
And I just let it happen because Anna said he was important to her. Now I was seeing it different, seeing how he'd slowly moved from the edge of our life to the center of it. How she'd made space for him that should have been mine. I found her old college yearbook buried in the closet and flipped through it. Found exactly 3 pictures of them together, always in group shots, never looking particularly close. Whatever story Max was selling about their grand love affair, the evidence didn't match up. That's when I realized he wasn't just crossing boundaries, he was rewriting history, and Anna was either believing it or pretending to believe it because the attention felt good. I grabbed his stuff from the drawer in our hallway, threw it all in a garbage bag, left it by the door. Anna asked what I was doing, and I told her I was making a decision she should have made years ago. That same night, I told Anna I was going to stay at my brother's place for a few days, that I needed space to think. She panicked immediately, asked me not to go, promised she'd talk to Max about boundaries. I repeated the word back to her, and it felt absurd given what I'd witnessed. This isn't about boundaries anymore. This is about safety. She looked confused, maybe genuinely didn't understand what I meant. And that scared me more than anything else, because it meant she truly couldn't see what Max had become or what she'd allowed him to become in our marriage. I packed a bag while she followed me around the apartment making promises that felt empty, saying she'd fix it, saying I was overreacting, saying everything except the one thing I needed to hear, which was that Max was completely out of our lives effective. Immediately the next morning, barely 12 hours after I'd arrived at my brother's place, Max sent me a text asking if everything was cool because Anna seemed distant lately. I stared at that message at how quickly he'd noticed a change in her behavior. How closely he must be watching to pick up on shifts within half a day. This wasn't friendship. This was surveillance. And the fact that my wife's emotional temperature mattered that much to another man made me feel sick. I didn't respond, just screenshotted it and started a folder on my phone. This part shows something most people miss. When someone notices your partner's mood changes within 12 hours, that's not friendship, that's obsession. The real question isn't just Max's behavior. It's why Anna never found it strange that her best friend monitored her moods more closely than her own husband did. My brother's wife suggested I talk to someone who actually knew Max before he became this fixture in our lives. Someone who could tell me if this behavior was new or if I'd just been blind to it for 7 years. I started with LinkedIn. Searched Max's connections. Found his ex-girlfriend from 2 years before he reconnected with Anna. Her name was Rachel and her profile said she worked in marketing downtown. I sent her a message saying I needed to talk about Max and Anna. Kept it vague. Didn't want to sound crazy. She responded within an hour with just 4 words that made my stomach drop. Finally, someone noticed. We met at a coffee shop near her office the next morning, and she didn't even wait for me to order before she started talking. She told me Max had been obsessed with Anna since college, that their whole friend group knew about it, that Anna had gone on maybe 2 dates with him before realizing something was off and cutting contact. But Max didn't accept that. He started showing up places Anna would be. Called her at odd hours, told mutual friends they were meant to be together, even after she'd made it clear they weren't. Rachel described an incident at Anna's dorm, where campus security got involved, where Anna's roommate filed a complaint, where the whole thing got messy enough that Anna transferred to finish her degree at a different school. I sat there feeling like the floor had disappeared underneath me because Anna had never mentioned transferring, never mentioned any of this, and I'd been married to her for 7 years. Rachel pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots she'd kept from when she dated Max messages where he talked about Anna like she was his property, like their story wasn't finished just because she'd moved away. He told Rachel that Anna was the one who got away, that he was just killing time until she came back to him. And when Rachel broke up with him, he didn't even seem upset, just said she wasn't Anna anyway. She told me Max had a whole folder on his laptop of photos he'd collected in his social media posts, pictures from mutual friends, screenshots of her tagged locations. Rachel explained she'd had his laptop password when they lived together. Got suspicious enough to look through his files before she moved out. Found organized folders labeled with Anna's name going back years. When Rachel confronted him about it, he said she was overreacting, that he was just keeping up with an old friend, but she'd seen the way he studied those photos like he was memorizing every detail. Rachel said she'd warned Anna about it back then. sent her a message about Max's continued fixation, but Anna never responded. And then years later, Rachel saw Instagram posts showing Max back in Anna's life, like nothing had happened. I asked if she still had any of those files and she nodded. Said she'd kept them because something told her they'd matter eventually. She airdropped me everything right there. Dozens of messages, photos of Max's photo collection, even a video Rachel had secretly recorded of him talking about Anna at a party. Drunk enough to be honest about his plans to eventually be with her. I drove back to my brother's place with my hands shaking on the wheel, pulled into the driveway, and just sat there trying to process what I'd learned. My brother came out, saw my face, and called his friend who used to work in private investigation before he switched to corporate security. His name was James, and he came over that evening with a laptop and a legal pad. Asked me to tell him everything in chronological order. We spent 4 hours building a timeline, starting from college and moving through every interaction I could remember. Every time Max showed up unannounced, every holiday he inserted himself into, every photo where he positioned himself between Anna and me. James pointed out patterns I hadn't consciously noticed. How Max's visits increased whenever Anna and I had any kind of conflict. How he always brought gifts that were slightly too personal. How he'd started dressing similar to me in the last 2 years. He's not trying to be with her. He's trying to replace you. Become so embedded that removing him feels impossible, James said, tapping his pen on a cluster of dates. We mapped out Max's social media posts and found he'd been tagging our location, our favorite restaurants, our vacation spots, building this digital narrative where he was part of our relationship, whether we acknowledged it or not. The next day, I drove back to our apartment because I needed to have this conversation face to face. Needed to see Anna's reaction when I showed her what I'd found. She was in the kitchen when I walked in. Looked relieved to see me. Started to say something about missing me, but I cut her off. Did Max threaten you in college? Her face went completely white, and that told me everything before she even opened her mouth. She tried to minimize it, said it was complicated, that his ex-girlfriend was just bitter and exaggerating, that Max had changed since then. I repeated the word changed like it was absurd, and pulled out my phone to show her the timeline James and I had built. She looked at it like she was seeing a puzzle piece she'd been avoiding. All those visits and messages and coincidences arranged in a pattern that was impossible to deny. I told her Max knew where we were all the time, that he showed up within an hour of us posting anything, that he was monitoring us and she'd been letting him. Anna's hands were shaking when she reached for the phone, tried to explain that she'd thought he was just being a good friend, that she'd felt sorry for him after his breakup, that she'd never imagined it was this calculated. Rachel sent me more files while Anna and I were still talking. Additional screenshots she'd found in old backups. There were subcategories in Max's collection, one labeled with Anna's name containing hundreds of photos organized by year and event. Screenshots of every comment Anna left on social media. Even saved copies of posts she deleted. There were notes too. Observations about what she wore, who she talked to, what time she usually left for work at the insurance company, where she'd been an adjuster for the last 4 years. I showed Anna the folder structure and explained this was a surveillance log, not friendship, that this obsession had been going on since before we even met. She started crying, said she'd broken contact with him after college, specifically because things got weird. But he'd reached out years later. Acting normal, apologizing, seeming stable. She believed he'd moved on. Thought the past was past. Never imagined he'd been watching her the entire time. I asked why she hadn't told me about college, and she said she was embarrassed. Thought it made her look naive. Didn't want me to think she had poor judgment about people. I pointed out that letting him back into our lives after that was the actual poor judgment. And she nodded, finally understanding what she'd invited back in. Max sent Anna a message around midnight asking if she was okay because he'd driven past our apartment and seen my car back in the driveway. I showed her the text and pointed out he was driving past our place at midnight, that he was escalating, that this surveillance was getting bolder. Anna stared at that message for a long time before she finally said she needed to cut contact completely, that she'd been wrong to think boundaries would be enough. I told her she needed to be harsh about it. No soft language, no room for interpretation, because men like Max heard what they wanted to hear in any ambiguity. We wrote the message together, short and direct, telling him not to contact her anymore, not to come by, that their friendship was over. Anna hesitated before sending it. Said it felt mean. Mean keeps you safe. I replied, and she finally pressed the button. Max's response came in seconds. A paragraph about how I was controlling her, how he knew she didn't really want this, how he had proof that she still cared about him. Then the call started one after another, 15 and 10 minutes. We let them go to voicemail and listened to them get progressively more unhinged. The last one saying she was his, that I'd stolen her, that he was coming over so they could talk in person. That message made me grab my keys and tell Anna we were leaving, going to a hotel for the night, because I didn't trust what Max might do when he realized she was serious. She was still hesitating, saying maybe we were overreacting when we heard someone pounding on our door. Here's the critical moment that changes everything. Anna finally understood that being nice to someone obsessed with you isn't kindness, it's fuel for their delusion. Even after seeing the surveillance folders and unhinged voicemails, she still hesitated to be mean. Because society teaches people that setting hard boundaries makes them the bad guy, when really it's the only thing that works with people who refuse to hear soft notes. The pounding got louder and Max started yelling through the door that he could see the lights on, that he knew we were home, that Anna needed to talk to him without me poisoning her mind. I called the police while Anna stood frozen in the hallway, her phone showing those 17 missed calls in the last 20 minutes. The operator told us to stay inside, keep the door locked, that officers were 7 minutes away. Max kept yelling, his voice getting more desperate, saying he'd been there for Anna when I wasn't, that their connection was real, that I was just threatened by what they had. When the police arrived, he immediately switched personalities, became calm and reasonable, told them there was a misunderstanding, that he was just checking on his best friend who'd sent him a concerning message. The officers separated us, took statements, and one of them pulled me aside to say this looked like harassment, but without a pattern of documented incidents, they could only tell him to leave. They gave us an incident report number and suggested we look into a restraining order if his behavior continued. Max left, but not before staring at our apartment window, and I knew from his expression that he didn't consider this over. That night, we blocked his number on both our phones, changed all our passwords, including Netflix, locked down our social media, and I booked us into a hotel anyway, because I couldn't shake the feeling he'd come back. The next morning, we met with a lawyer who specialized in protective orders, brought the timeline James had helped us build, Rachel's screenshots, the incident report from last night, and recordings of Max's voice messages. The lawyer listened to everything, made notes, and told us we had a strong case for a temporary restraining order that could become permanent after a hearing. She explained the process would take about 2 weeks to get the temporary order, that Max would be served with papers, that he'd have a chance to contest it in court about 3 weeks after filing. People like this often escalate when they're officially cut off. Document everything. Don't engage with him directly, and call the police immediately if he violates the temporary order. We filed the paperwork that afternoon, and the lawyer said Max would be served within 48 hours. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. Kept checking the windows even though we'd installed security cameras at our front door and parking area the day before. Changed our locks and told our neighbors and building manager about the situation. Max got served at his workplace 2 days later, and the fallout was immediate. He started sending Anna emails from different accounts, each one more manipulative than the last, saying she was making a mistake, that he had proof she'd let him on, that he'd show everyone the truth about our marriage. Then the fabricated screenshots started appearing. Messages that looked like they were from Anna, saying she loved him, that she was only staying with me out of obligation, that they'd been planning to be together. I showed them to James, who examined the metadata and pointed out they were obviously edited, different fonts, timestamps that didn't match up, messages inserted into threads that didn't exist in the original conversations. James explained how Max had taken real conversations and spliced in fake responses, building a counter-narrative to use in court to make himself look like the victim. We documented every fake screenshot, had James write up a technical analysis showing the manipulation, and sent everything to our lawyer. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after we filed, and Max showed up looking like he'd lost sleep, playing the part of someone wronged. His lawyer tried to paint him as a longtime family friend who'd been suddenly cut off because I was jealous and controlling. Used those fake screenshots as evidence that Anna had encouraged his attention. Our lawyer was ready. Presented the timeline going back to college, Rachel's testimony about his obsession, the surveillance folder, the escalating messages, and James' analysis proving the screenshots were fabricated. The judge looked at Max's folder of Anna's photos, organized by year and date. Listened to the voice message where he said Anna was his, and asked Max directly why he'd been documenting another man's wife so thoroughly. Max stumbled through an answer about preserving memories of their friendship, but it sounded hollow, even to his own lawyer. This goes beyond friendship. This is obsessive monitoring and the fabricated evidence. Suggests you're not grounded in reality about this relationship, the judge said, looking at the evidence spread across her desk. She granted a 3-year restraining order, no contact of any kind, no coming within 500 feet of us, our home, or Anna's workplace, no third-party communication. Max stared at us as we left the courthouse, and I could see he still didn't accept it. Still thought this was temporary, that Anna would come back to him once she saw reason. We went home, and Anna finally broke down, cried in a way she hadn't since this started, said she felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, for letting him back in after college, for thinking his obsession had just been a phase. I told her that manipulation works because it's gradual, that Max had spent years normalizing his presence, making her doubt her own instincts, positioning himself as indispensable. We started therapy the following week, both individual sessions for Anna and couples counseling for us. Her therapist specialized in helping people who'd been manipulated by long-term psychological abuse. Worked with Anna on understanding why she'd minimized Max's behavior, why she'd been afraid to enforce boundaries, why his attention had felt validating even when part of her knew it was wrong. I had conditions for staying in the marriage, and I made them clear from the start. Anna needed to stay in therapy, work on understanding her part in this, figure out why she'd valued Max's validation more than our relationship's health. We needed complete transparency, her phone and social media open to me until trust rebuilt. No private conversations with mutual friends who might pass information to Max. If you break the restraining order, if you contact him in any way, I'm done. I told her, and she agreed without hesitation. The first few months were hard. Anna had moments where she defended her past choices, where she tried to minimize what had happened, but her therapist kept bringing her back to reality. Slowly, she started seeing the patterns, how Max had exploited her guilt and empathy, how he'd made her responsible for his emotional state, how he positioned himself as the one person who truly understood her while systematically isolating her from recognizing how unhealthy their dynamic had become. We're 8 months past the restraining order now, and life feels different, quieter, like we're finally building something that's just ours. Max violated the order once, showed up at Anna's workplace trying to deliver a letter, and spent a night in jail before his lawyer got him out. The judge extended the restraining order another 2 years and warned him the next violation would mean serious jail time. Anna quit her adjuster position after that incident. Didn't want to risk him knowing her schedule or location. Found a remote position with a different insurance company. We moved to a different neighborhood where Max wouldn't know our routines. Didn't tell mutual friends our new address. Basically started fresh. We still have cameras, still check our surroundings, still save every blocked call or email that manages to get through, but the panic has faded into caution. Anna's therapist says she's made real progress. That she's learning to recognize manipulation patterns, to trust her instincts instead of explaining them away, to understand that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. Our marriage isn't what it was 7 years ago. But maybe that's good. Maybe what we had before was built on ignoring problems instead of solving them. Now we have actual boundaries, real conversations about what we need, and space that belongs only to us without someone else's shadow filling it. The apartment feels bigger somehow now that it's just the two of us. Now that every photo on our wall is actually ours. Now that the person sitting next to Anna on the couch is the person who's supposed to be there. The real lesson here is that some people will exploit your kindness as permission to stay in your life long after they should have been gone. And the hardest part isn't recognizing the red flags. It's accepting that years of history don't justify tolerating behavior that makes you unsafe.
Documentation saved this situation.
Trusting my instincts despite being called controlling saved this situation, and understanding that "but we've been friends forever" should never trump "this person is obsessed with my spouse" save this marriage. Would you have caught the signs earlier, or would you have also dismissed them as overthinking? If your partner hid a dangerous past like Anna did, could you rebuild trust, or would that be the deal breaker?